Download our free guide, Starting Your Photo Business, at photoshelter.com/mkt/research.
Hey, this is Grover. This is the voice of Grover from PhotoShelter, and you're not looking at me right now. You're looking at John Harrington. He's a freelance photographer in Washington, D.C., and he is currently the president of the White House News Photographers Association. Now, John knows a thing or two about business. That's why we've got him dialed in here. We're connected via Skype. He wrote a book on best business practices for photographers, which is currently in its second edition, and of course, that's available at Amazon. So, hi, John.
Hey, Grover, how's it going?
Good.
Good.
So I want to ask you some questions. This is primarily for people just getting started in the business.
Sure.
So, and I hear this question a lot. I'm sure you do too. When you're just getting started in the photo business, what's the best way for you to establish your pricing?
Well, the first thing I think to think about when you're trying to establish your pricing is, when a phone rings and it's a photo editor calling, let's say they're calling me and they're calling, photographer X down the street who just started and hung out their shingle, a month ago. If I was having a kind of a conversation with photographer X, I would say, hey, so, do you think your rate should be less than mine? I've been doing this 20 years, about the same as mine or more than mine. And, when I have that conversation more often than not with, aspiring photographers or students who are looking to enter into the field in short order, more often than not, they decide and they conclude, well, I should be less than you. You've been doing this for so long, and I'm just starting out. And I think that's not correct. If that photo editor has determined that photographer X and myself are capable of doing the assignment they want, then there is no reason why we shouldn't be comparably priced. Now, it might take me less time. Let's say the picture that they want taken is a picture of the United States Capitol down the street. In an instance like that, I might know, gosh, I want to photograph it from this angle, and in order to do that, I need to go down there at this time of day, and I could actually maybe accomplish that shot in 15 minutes. But for a photographer just starting out, they might actually need to take all day to go down and walk around the Capitol and find the angle that inspires them and means something to them. So it might take them a little longer, but in the end, there's no reason why the fee that the both of us charge shouldn't be equal. Now, if that photographer thinks they're more creative and more talented than I am, and I'm open to that as a possibility, then they should charge more if that's what they want their rate to be. But there's no reason that they should charge less than me simply because they think they're not experienced enough. If the market is determined that both of us are capable of doing the job, then there's no reason our fees shouldn't be similar. Now, one of the best resources that I know to kind of help you understand what your rates should be is the MPPA's business calculator. It's on the MPPA website. It's interactive. It's got a whole bunch of things on the screen that you need to look at and help you understand what the cost of doing business is. And by going there and kind of looking through and working through this little interactive worksheet, there's this really great thing right next to each one of the boxes where you get to put your numbers in that are numbers that are specific to you, where you can click on the question mark and up comes, this is what you should be thinking about as you're trying to develop your price for this particular category. And it may be that, for example, you're a photographer that doesn't need or want a studio right now, but you say, gosh, maybe in 10 years I want a studio. So maybe you'd enter in 0 in that category now, but as you're playing with the calculator, you might actually enter in, a figure that's higher than that because down the line you want it. You might also not want life insurance right now because you don't have any kids. That's okay. You should always have life insurance, by the way, but if you choose not to, because you don't have kids, certainly when you have kids intermarried, life insurance is a critical, component of what you're doing, cost of business wise. Then you need to understand that. So all the questions are there. You get to ask the questions, for yourself. If you're living in a group home for $150 in the middle of the country, or if you're living in a group home where it's $600 in New York City, those numbers you get to plug in. Once you've done that, at the bottom of this worksheet is a place where you get to key in your salary. Now, if you key in your salary at, minimum wages was what, $8.25 an hour, that works out to be, about 64 or 70, it's about $70 a day. It's $70 a day. It's $350 a week. It's, $20,000 a month, $20,000 a year. You punch that number in, and then you punch in the number of assignments you think you're going to accomplish. once you do that and you realize that you're somewhere in the $200 to $300 range, really even at the bare minimum, when the phone call comes in from a photo editor or some corporate client saying, oh, we've budgeted $200 for a headshot, or we have $100 for our assignment for the newspaper for the day, you're then paying for the privilege of doing that shoot. And that is not economically sustainable. Anyone can do that for 3 or 6 months, but you want to be a photographer for a long time, not just 3 or 6 months. And if you take a loss every day you're out making pictures, then the losses will pile up, the bills will pile up, and you will have to go and wait tables or work in retail or do something you don't love. And so that you need to, every job you do needs to be a profitable one, at the very minimum, cover your hard costs or your costs to do that. And so I would encourage you to check out that calculator and really sit down and think about what your costs of doing business are.
Right. I think a lot of photographers make a big mistake in that they do it like a little survey of the landscape kind of a situation, whereas maybe they'll talk to other photographers and find out what those photographers are charging and then try to base their rates on that. Or maybe they'll get on a phone call with an editor and the editor will say, well, no, we've only budgeted $100 for that, and then try to get a base feel for pricing based on those kinds of discussions. So what can a photographer do to combat that kind of trap?
Well, if a client comes to you and says, my budget for this photo shoot is $100 or $200, there's a really you need to be able to resist that. And there's a really great video on YouTube called The Vendor-Client Relationship. And on that, it really kind of explains the concept of, well, just because someone tells you what their budget is doesn't mean you have to make it work at that number. One of the things that I always ask clients during the course of my phone call is, what budget are you trying to work within? Now, the operative word in that sentence is trying. Just because someone tells me they have $500 or $1,000 or $200 doesn't mean that I'm going to be able to do the job for that rate. And so I always send the estimate, because the last thing I want to do is have them say, oh, I have $500 for this job, and I would normally come in at somewhere around $1,200 or $1,500 for that job. In an instance like that, I'll send the estimate, because if I go, oh, that's ridiculous, I'm not sending the estimate, they're out of their mind. What happens is then the other photographers that prospective client is talking to are hopefully going to send in their estimates, maybe without asking that what budget you're trying to work within question. And they're going to be at, $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 maybe. And I'm the one that's ignored it because $500 is out of line. And then all of a sudden, once that client is essentially schooled, if you will, on what the rate should be, they're not going to be considering me because I didn't bother to send my estimate in. So I always send the estimate in. And I always say to them, we worked over the numbers and we're not able to hit that budget number that you were looking for, but attach, please find an estimate for what we can do the work for, and we look forward to the possibility of working with you on this project. And sometimes there are clients that are just fishing out there for some crazy number, and whoever comes back at it, they're not going to use because it's a ridiculous number they knew they couldn't get it for. And there are other instances where they spent their money elsewhere and they don't want to spend it on photography. Well, they're going to have to end up spending it on photography. So, the challenge, of course, is there's a downward spiral. If everyone's trying to undercut everybody else, eventually we'll get to zero. I mean, if you look at the, Getty Images or in iStock Photo, Getty bought iStock Photo, when Getty's average stock sale was $900 and change, almost $1,000. And they bought a company that was selling photos for $1. I mean, at some point now there are stock services out there where you get to use the photos for free. And at what point are you paying for the privilege of having pictures placed? I mean, there's this downward spiral, and you just don't want to be a part of that. Set your rates based upon what your cost of doing business is, what you feel you're worth, and take it from there. And talk to people about budgets, but don't be hamstrung by them.
Thanks a lot, John. Really great information. I appreciate your time, and hope to see you soon.
My pleasure. Looking forward to seeing it grow.